everybody. I'm on a paddleboard in Lake Michigan right now. Brian's paddling. Okay, so when I opened up for Charlene a couple weeks ago, I did some characters, I did some silly songs, and then I did these 3 essays about childhood, the year I turned 7, and my obsession with Beethoven. I was gonna try and post maybe everything, and then I was like, I'll just post the Beethoven essays and the songs. But actually, one of the songs got cut off by the camera. The camera stopped in the middle of one of the songs. I'll do the songs as a separate video later. But for now, here are my 3 Beethoven essays. I may never do them again. So this might be the only time anyone will see them. Or maybe I'll keep working on them, perfecting them, and who knows? Mom and Dad, you're not allowed to watch this, okay? So turn off the video. Bye. Hey everybody, my name is Meredith, and I am Charlene's lucky friend who gets to open for her tonight. I hope to warm you all up with some thoughtful prose, making your throats feel open and loose like the long pink tubes that they are. I'll be doing a few characters from shows past, like I just did, and some silly songs here and there, but mostly I'll be reading you these essays that focus solely on the year I turned 7 and my fascination with an angry man with lead poisoning from the 1700s, Beethoven. Age 7 is a weird time for people with vaginas, as we are just about to begin puberty, years before our penile counterparts. I wasn't one of the unfortunate 3rd graders who developed breasts early or anything like that, but I definitely had my fair share of non-verbalized feelings and changes to my body that I didn't understand. I lived in my own head back then. Back when other girls in my 3rd grade class were doing healthy things like pausing their VHSs to try and catch a glimpse of Devon Sawa's penis, and I was getting totally fucked up at the library. Library books about the tragic life and times of Beethoven. Though he'd been dead for over a century, there was something undeniably exciting about the fact that he lost his ability to hear, and yet was still able to write world-altering symphonies and scream swear words while throwing porridge on waiters. I started taking piano lessons at age 7 with the hopes that I would one day play Moonlight Sonata, his best song. I used to practice for hours in what I now call my dad's Republican room. It's the den in our house which has dark wood molding, an elaborate built-in bookshelf filled with books about World War II, a cigar collection, replica Thomas Kincaid paintings of cabins, and our upright piano down with a fake marble bust of old Beethoven himself. This was the perfect room for a young girl to experience horniness over a sad man for the first time. I didn't know it was horniness at the time, though. Sex and natural human feelings weren't a topic in our household. I knew very little about myself and my body, so I just focused on things I liked, like mice and Regency-era paraphernalia. I loved watching period pieces because of the sounds their clicky shoes made on stone streets. To me, I think a clicky shoe was sexually fulfilling. More on that later. Our house was custom built for us in the beginning of the 90s and souped up with all the good stuff, including a surround sound system that may or may not work anymore. I can't tell, because when I ask my parents about it, they get dodgy. Probably because things like our dated sound system remind them of change and mortality. But back in the day, when we had our whole lives ahead of us, there used to be constant music blasting through it. I mean, you could put 6 CDs in there at one time. When my mom needed to concentrate on paperwork or whatever the fuck adults do, still don't know, she usually chose classical music. This was how I was first introduced to the sultry sounds of Ludwig van. Yummy, 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 that bitch could play. And yes, I definitely thought that was really Beethoven on my CD. Once I learned that he couldn't even hear some of the music he wrote, and that he was known for being sad and mean, I fell head over heels of wanting to be the one girl who really understood Beethoven on the deepest level. A trait that would haunt me well into my adult life. First step, I needed to get good at piano. So after I started piano lessons and my parents realized I wasn't a fucking quitter, they really honed in on my musical interests. They got me these 2 historical fiction stories in the form of radio plays on cassette. One was called Beethoven Lives Upstairs, and the other was Mr. Bach Comes to Call. I listened to the Beethoven one every single night before bed. In the story, Beethoven moves into the upstairs apartment of a boy named Christoph's home after Christoph's dad dies and his mom is left with no money. During that time, Beethoven composes some of his greatest hits, including his 9th Symphony. Ever heard of it? I wanted to be Christoph so bad. He could hear Beethoven's music and screams at all hours of the night. And being tripped on by the water Beethoven threw all over the floor in a rage. I loved the exploration of Christoph's dismay over having a sociopath move into his house, but later soften up as he realizes that only a beautiful, tortured soul could produce such music. In my head, it felt like an enemies to lovers story, only I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew I had a yearning to share my home with a talented terror. A movie version of Beethoven Lives Upstairs came out on VHS. Ooh, mama. Now, I wasn't a masturbator growing up. Sorry, subject change. But I think it's related. In my mind, it's related. Remember how earlier I was talking about the clicky shoes and I was like, more later? Yeah, I think it's related. So yeah, I didn't really masturbate. And I didn't even know how an orgasm worked until I was an actual adult, after I had been sexually active for a good 4 long years. Sorry, is this too fucked up? Trying to nobody else. So sometimes I get jealous when I hear my friends talk about how they already understood their own vaginas and wants and needs in puberty. Not this pervert. I had pent up hormones and feelings that I couldn't understand, so they manifested in random and confusing fantasies about calming down Beethoven. In the film Beethoven Lives Upstairs, Christoph is sent to get pencils for a very stressed out Beethoven. He has to run fast, because Beethoven is about to blow! And the orchestra begs Christoph to please help. As a child, I would put on my black buckled dress shoes and run in circles in my unfinished basement. The sound of my shoes clicking against the cement floor made me feel like I was running through the cobblestone streets of Vienna circa 1820. I'd run like this for a really long time. If I were to guess, 45 minutes to an hour. Just replaying the scene in my head over and over. As I ran, I'd whisper, Mr. Beethoven needs more pencils. I had a strong sense of purpose, and it thrilled me. If one of my parents or my brother walked into the basement, I'd stop abruptly and act like I was doing something normal, hiding my buckled shoes, not daring to move so nobody would hear a clickety on that cement floor. Then, when they were out of earshot, I'd be back in Vienna, dodging puddles and horse shit as I clicked along. So, was this my way of masturbating? Do you know what I mean? Since I didn't know what masturbating was, and I only had information that was presented to me to go off of, was this my way of naturally exploring desire? Do you all know what I mean? If 2 people never learned about sex in any capacity, would they naturally be able to figure it out together? Now, if those same 2 people were very familiar with Beethoven Lives Upstairs, would they start running around trying to get pencils for each other? They wouldn't know any better. I didn't know any better. If someone doesn't know what their own clit is, but they do know that the sound of a quickie heel on cobblestone is pleasing to the ear, can that be turned into a sex scene? Is this how fetishes are born? husband, and he said, I think you can hone in on the central idea here a little more. What is the point you're trying to make? And the answer is, I don't know. I know that I didn't know what my vagina really was, but I did know that Beethoven needed pencils. Are y'all understanding the complex deep dive I'm doing into the human psyche here? Can the urgency and uncertainty behind will I get pencils for Beethoven in time be compared to, like, edging? In the year 1994, the film Immortal Beloved came out in theaters. It was a film about Beethoven starring Gary Oldman. It focused on Beethoven's tortured romances, and the trailer had lots of shots of Beethoven looking at beautiful women with horny anger in his eyes. When I saw the trailer on television, I felt the tingles! I looked at my parents, who looked at each other with panic. We know, they said. They had been dreading me knowing about the movie because it was rated R. I foamed at the mouth and bled out of my eyes, begging them to take me to see it. So they made a compromise. They would see the movie first, then decide whether or not it was okay for me to see. Unfortunately, the answer was very much no. To try and make things better, they bought me the soundtrack. I would stare at the movie stills that were scattered throughout the sleeve of the CD, dreaming of what the movie could possibly be about, what mysteries it would unlock. I was ready to go to the beyond with Beethoven. Why hadn't he come for me? I would lay my head down on the piano keys and shut my eyes as tight as I could, focusing really hard on willing Beethoven's spirit to come visit me in the Republican room. I imagined him saying, I've been watching you. For years I've been watching you, and you play my music just as I intended it. Something nobody else has ever achieved. You know me better than I know myself. Then he'd turn and fade away, his shoes clicking into the distance while I came for the first time. Fast forward to like 16 years later. I'm a college graduate hanging out with my two friends, Sarah and Mark. We are flipping through the free movies on demand, trying to pick something fun. I see Immortal Beloved on the list and I flip out. I say, oh my god, you guys, you have no idea how long I've wanted to see this movie. It's so important to me. I actually hadn't thought about this movie at all in the last decade, but still, I persisted, manipulating my friends into watching it, even though they had no interest whatsoever. But anyone who knows me knows I get what I want. I fell asleep 10 minutes into the movie. While Sarah and Mark watched it in its entirety, 2 hours. They were pissed and bored. The next morning, I started the movie over and watched it alone, just like I always wanted. It only took 15 minutes for me to understand why my parents didn't want me to see that movie. A scene opened with a woman walking backward, pure fiery lust in her eyes, unbuttoning her dress and exposing her breasts. Beethoven followed closely behind with his grabby hands out and steam coming out of his ears and his tongue is flapping all around. And then next thing I know, he's angry at every single woman. I'm sorry to tell you all, but Beethoven was an incel. Okay, message from my August 3rd self. I just read this to my husband, and he said that I can't call Beethoven an incel because he probably did fuck. Okay. We all know what I mean by incel, though, right? I've actually learned a lot more about Beethoven in the years since I was clicking and clacking to get those pencils. As it turns out, Beethoven actually kidnapped his nephew Carl, starving him and forcing him to practice piano for hours on end in captivity, eventually driving Carl to a suicide attempt. This is all in the movie. I can see why my parents didn't want me to see that. They knew my obsession with Beethoven kept me glued to my piano so they could watch ER. There's no way they would destroy that. I also read a book that described Beethoven's many illnesses in detail, including the fact that in his final weeks, his stomach would regularly fill with fluid, making him round like a balloon. So doctors would come over and pop him, draining bile, allowing it to seep into his bedding and mattress. Apparently, the smell was unbearable. Also, turns out his body was riddled with lead, so if that doesn't dry you up, I don't know what was the sick part. Though I don't think I would have understood the severity or context of what was happening, I still think that learning these facts would have tainted my view of my hero. And I may never have actually learned Moonlight Sonata, which is probably my greatest achievement, if I'm being honest with myself. It's like a really hard song, and your fingers gotta stretch really long. But I learned how to play it by age 12, which is when I peaked at piano before totally throwing away my talent into the trash. Beethoven set the bar for the kinds of sad, mad guys I was unfortunately attracted to for a long, long time. One of my first ever boyfriends told me that he was the first to cry on 9/11. One of my last ever boyfriends was bummed because women didn't give him enough credit for giving them so many great opportunities in the comedy world at Chicago Institution. Even my own husband has his little Beethoven moments. Toiling up over little things like mismatched Tupperware or old people, or cutting into my essays saying that I can't call Beethoven an incel. Okay, I realize that Beethoven probably fucked, but can we all agree that the only reason Beethoven fucked is because he wrote this song? You know, even with such beautiful compositions to be heard, I am glad that I didn't live in Beethoven's home in the early 1800s. I probably would have ended up having to pop his ass and ruin that. Thanks, everybody.